Okay, I think that worked. All right, well, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We are going to spend some time talking about AI tools for students and how those AI tools can be helpful for students. If you don't know me, I'm Stephanie Pritchard. I'm a faculty member in the English and Creative Writing department, and John and Maggie have agreed to do this presentation with me so that we can share some of the resources that we've come up with and, like just kind of talk generally about AI and how it can be helpful for our students. So please forgive me because this is new for me, so I'm looking in all the wrong places. John, did you want to say hi?
Hi.
Hello.
All right, so let's get started. So this is going to be our first of 3 workshops on AI. So today's focus is going to be student-centered. Today we're going to be talking about students, and we've got one for faculty as well. And then what was our last one that we decided? Do you remember?
It was something also related to students. I forgot exactly what it was.
Okay.
I think the title is in the schedule.
There are 3 of them. So
Yes.
Stay tuned for 2 more. All right. So this past summer, I joined the SUNY-wide task group, and John was on it too. And our job was to think about AI's role in higher education and what that means, both for us and for our students in teaching and learning. So at the beginning, when the task group first got together toward the end of May or early June, there was a lot of panic. I think everybody was really nervous because, we've got this technology that's essentially going to make some big changes into how we're teaching and learning and what that means, how we understand that. So I've spent the summer sort of working on figuring out how we can use AI kind of like to our advantage, and how AI is going to make changes, certainly, to how we do things, but how some of those changes can be really positive. And not all just really scary. So the way that I've divided up my portion, and I'll have John and Maggie sort of like jump in whenever you would like, is to think about AI tools in the classroom, both like during class and then outside of class as well. So I suppose I'll start by asking everybody who's here, if you have planned to use AI tools in the classroom this semester, maybe like an in-class activity, and if so, what are you thinking about? Or if you're not sure, because it is still really new, right? And we're still learning a lot about it, and you're mostly here kind of like looking for ideas. So I'm going to start with Maggie because you're on Zoom. So would you mind going first?
Sure. So, AI tools and in-class activities. I know John had just talked about this, but I was like, oh yeah, I need to do this for my death penalty class. By like having students interview the like a figure, and for me I was like, oh, they can like ask them how they feel about the death penalty, right? Because there's like a whole section on public opinion, and so that's yeah, the one of the things I was thinking about for in class, though I'm teaching online this semester, so that's a little bit different.
I'm glad that you brought up the online part though, Maggie, because that's something that I think, are still trying to figure out a lot, right? Like what this means for online courses, whether they're synchronous or asynchronous. That sounds like a really cool activity. So they would create all of these different questions, and then what would they do with their responses?
So I was thinking about having them respond via Flip, which is a video service, so they could, just kind of talk about what they found, and how it compared with their opinions and so forth. Like
Cool.
a discussion.
The opinion thing sounds really cool, because that might be a neat opportunity for them to address any misconceptions or assumptions that they may have, right? That's a cool idea. John, how about you?
Well, I'm going to encourage my students to use it for review purposes, so that if there's something they don't quite understand in the readings and the videos that I provide for them, I'm going to suggest to them that they use ChatGPT or some other AI tool to generate some review materials or some tutorials, and also some practice questions. It can also generate study guides if they need to review something a little bit more. So I'm going to encourage students to use it to fill in any gaps that they might have in their prior knowledge, because I'm only teaching introductory microeconomics this semester, and a lot of students come in with a really weak understanding of using graphs and math and some of the basic concepts, and this can help them at least get through some of the materials that they might find a little more challenging. I do have students doing it, and one of my classes is online, and I do have students doing a podcast project, and I'll encourage them to use it to do a little bit of to get some ideas for concepts and things that they might not have thought, to generate, maybe to help get them started with an outline of their podcast prep, and also maybe to do a little bit of work cleaning up the grammar and the arguments, and asking if there's any things that they missed and so forth, because it can analyze writing and proofread writing and give you some pretty good feedback. I know a lot of faculty are already using it to generate feedback to give to students in some low stakes writing assignments early. So there's a lot of things we can use it for, but many of those uses students can use too productively. The challenge, of course, is in the online class measuring their learning, because I have had issues this spring and also this summer with turning in work that was pretty much entirely generated by ChatGPT. In one case, I know Maggie's heard this. In one case, I had a student turn in something this summer where I asked them, because I had rewritten a lot of my prompts for online questions so that they were not very vulnerable to ChatGPT. One of the questions was to have students look at data on unemployment rates at different ages and so forth for the last 6 months, which is outside of the training database with ChatGPT, and to analyze the causes of the changes in unemployment that they've observed using the concepts from the chapter. And one student turned in an essay response that began with, as an AI tool, I do not have access to the data needed to address this question, but you can find it on the Bureau of Labor Statistics website with the URL for it. And that was directly turned in with a student without any processing. And I've had other students do things that were close to that, but it's harder to tell. But when that type of thing is turned on, it's a bit of a challenge. So I am concerned about being able to assess learning in an online environment. But it does offer a lot of tools, and we have to prepare students for the world in which they're living, not the world in which we started off our work. So
yeah, it's so surprising to me that like the response began that way, right? Like you said, your student submitted something that literally started with, I am an AI tool, and that seems very concerning to me.
Yeah.
there was
I
no
should,
attempt.
Yeah.
yeah, because online, teaching online, it does kind of take away some of that real time checking, on how they're using these tools. I do have, some writing incorporated into the class, and like John had mentioned, part of that writing assessment is to use AI to, check their grammar and spelling, and then write, a paragraph and a footnote on, what kind of patterns they saw of the corrections that were made, and how they can use that in their future writing. So, my hope is to lean into students being able to use these tools, and to think critically about how it can benefit them.
Definitely. And Josh, have you thought about using AI tools in class?
I've been thinking about it all summer.
Yeah.
And I haven't finalized anything. I really need to do it. I'm hoping I can see it. And I know from other sessions what it can do, but I am thinking about, for example, with our research paper requirement, I'm thinking about it maybe as a way to help students start off, because I assign them topics, and then part of the class is a library session where they explore how to do research, how to discern reputable sources, how to cite them. But there's still some students who have just trouble getting started. So I'm wondering, I've heard that that's a good use of ChatGPT. And maybe it could even help guide them towards new ideas and maybe sources. But the last maybe 10th of my brain is thinking about kind of the issue John raised about making sure the students are doing it with their own effort at the end. So I don't know if there's a foolproof method, or there isn't really a foolproof method, but I would at least like students to know that at the end, I do expect them to submit their own written work. But I'm already starting to think, what does that mean these days? What does one's own written work mean these days, right? So I'm at the idea phase, but I also want to show students that we're current, that we're trying to help them, and not also to be sort of head in the sand and assuming that they're not using it. I want them to know, yep, we're on this, we're watching this, and hopefully it'll be helpful, but not replace them actually doing research and doing writing. That's what I'm about.
One thing that some people have suggested is to have students write, to use it perhaps to generate an essay and on a particular topic in the discipline, and then to assign them to fact check it and to find sources and references to verify it, which will both help them develop their critical thinking skills and recognize that it's not perfect, that it will generate what they call hallucinations, where it just makes stuff up if it doesn't have something in its database, because it's really just a predictive model of predicting the next word based on the words that have come before, with some randomness added in, so it won't generate identical responses for each prompt.
I've heard one of my colleagues refer to it as copy and paste on steroids, basically, like
Maybe not steroids, maybe
Yeah.
some type of hallucinogenic.
Yeah, that might be more appropriate, yeah.
Sometimes it happens to be really good and really topical. If there's a lot of material in its training database, it gets really good responses. If it's something that doesn't have as much material, it just randomly throws some stuff together.
Yep. So we're actually, some of the examples that I have, as a writing teacher, connect a lot to the things that you were saying about the research paper, especially. So I'm going to move through the two examples of in-class, or a couple of examples of in-class activities, and then switch to a few like out-of-class assignments that I'm going to experiment with this semester, because that's really all this is a giant experiment.
Are you recording that screen or the other one?
I don't know.
Do you see the box around?
I see on this screen. Oh, like, was I supposed to click on those three dots right there?
When you record, did it ask which screen to record?
No.
Okay.
It just said record.
It should be okay.
Okay. Okay, so the first kind of in-class activity that you can do, and you can do this outside of class also, but I think it's helpful to do something like this in class, is something that's called prompt engineering. And basically what that means, and that's a clickable link on the slide, so you can read more about prompt engineering and sort of how it works. There's a faculty member from the University of Sydney who has been doing a lot of research on generative AI. His name's Dr. Danny Liu, and he's been really wonderful. He's been producing a lot of really good stuff, and I've got him cited at the end of this presentation too. So that prompt engineering link will go to something that he wrote, but basically the idea is teaching students how to use the AI to give them responses that will be more helpful than not. So it's almost like using, like learning how to use a database or learning how to do a really good Google search for those reasons, just typing in something super generic like cats is going to give you all kinds of hits, and some of them might be appropriate, but lots of them are not going to work. So the same kind of general ideas are applicable to using generative AI. So Dr. Liu suggested that if you want to prompt the AI, putting in these 4 criteria is the best way to kind of go about doing it. So for example, I'm going to pretend that I'm a student, And maybe I wrote an essay for my English composition class and I'm getting ready to turn the essay in and I want the AI to proofread it for me. So one thing that I could do as a student is I could put my essay in and I could say, please proofread this. Basic command, right? And the AI will do that. But if you put the prompt in more specifically, then the AI will do a much better job. So like if we follow these four criteria, I might say, here is an essay that I've written for my college level English composition class. I would like you to play the role of my college professor. Your task is to evaluate this essay for, and then maybe put in the criteria that you're being evaluated for if you have an assignment sheet or if people use a rubric, right? So maybe say something like, please evaluate this based on the strength of the analysis, grammar and punctuation, organization, and originality of ideas or something, right? Like give it a couple of criteria. And then you can give it some basic requirements. So you might say something like, please don't make your feedback longer than 3 paragraphs. I would like something relatively concise so it's easier for me to read. And I don't have any additional instructions at this time. So instead of just saying something really basic, like please proofread this, if you give it a set of criteria to follow and plug in what you're looking for, it will do a way better job. And you can do that with lots of different things, not just proofreading a paper. So students can do prompt engineering, like John was saying, to help as like a brainstorming tool. Maggie's assignment suggestion about the interview questions, right? Like you can do this in all kinds of different ways, but the more specific you get, the better the AI will work for you. So I think one of the things I want to do is it's like a literacy skill, really, is teaching students how to use this in a better way instead of just a really straightforward way.
And I will mention that there is a Coursera course that's out of Vanderbilt on prompt engineering. It's a 3-week course, takes about 6 hours a week. And we actually have a podcast with one of the participants in that coming up in late September, or early October.
Oh, cool. I'll have to keep an eye out for that one.
Actually.
Nice.
Oh,
has been
wonderful.
doing it, so,
Okay.
along with lots of other work.
Lots of other stuff. Yeah. Okay. So that's one way that you can sort of or teach your students to use this, and you can do it in a whole bunch of different ways. One of the things that I'm super excited about is this second example, and John talked about this a little bit, the brainstorming and proofreading. I really love this for brainstorming. So I do some activities in my writing classes already to help students brainstorm. The assignment that I give is usually, it's considered kind of complicated by my students. They have to choose a community that they currently belong to. And then they have to write about how their community uses literacy, how their community uses written words to like function in the world. So the community part is super easy, right? Because they'll say, I'm an athlete, I'm a baseball player, I'm a female, I want to be a scientist, I'm from a small town, I'm whatever, right? So that part is super easy, they don't have any trouble with, but they struggle really hard with the literacy portion, right? With like the written words, and that's what kind of moves it to more of an analytical thing. So what I want to show you is going to work.
What is that?
Oh, this is the new BART AI in Google.
Oh my goodness.
Oh,
Yeah, I've been playing with a lot.
one.
All right. Okay, geez.
Just seeing new things on the side there.
Oh, yep, sorry.
So it won't clutter it up.
Yep.
Okay.
All right, so I think it was this one. I got to get oh, nope, that was a different example. I'll show in a second. It was this one. Okay, so I put the prompt that I had on the original screen into ChatGPT. So I asked it, I said, I have to write a research paper about a community I belong to and how it uses literacy for my English composition college class. Can you ask me some questions, one question at a time, please, so I can respond to help me brainstorm for the assignment? So the AI was super helpful and it was like, I'd be happy to help you. So it wants to know what community am I thinking about using for the assignment. So this is the example that I always give my students in class. So I say like the community of working moms, because I want it to be, I try to pick something that like they're not all gonna pick, you know? So then the AI is like, oh, I really like your topic. Let's get into some questions. So then it asks me, how do working moms use literacy skills in their everyday lives? Are there specific tasks or situations where literacy plays a crucial role? So I decided to kind of be like my student a little bit and say, well, I don't really know, you know, because like I've never really thought about how people use written words, you know, like adults in their lives. So I'm not really sure. So then I'm kind of like spitballing and I'm thinking about things that you write down. And I say, well, I make a lot of lists to help me stay organized, but I also read a lot of stuff on social media, you know, like about parenting and whatever. So the list idea is like not very exciting. Like I don't know how I'm going to write a whole analytical essay about lists, but I mean, the blog post could be interesting, right? That's like relevant. It's happening in the world. Can you ask me a question about blog posts? And it says, sure. So then it asks me a question about blog posts. And it's asking me for specifics, right? And so again, I'm kind of being one of my students and I'm pretending that I don't really know, right? Like what the names are. And it's not giving me any suggestions because I haven't asked it to at this point. So I'm saying, well, there are some magazines that feature posts or content. And I read them when my daughter goes to bed, but sometimes they make me feel guilty. And then the AI says, oh, that's really interesting. So let's look at like the mom guilt thing. And then it kind of goes that way. And then we continue to have this exchange. And every single time it asks me another question. And then I start to get like some really interesting insights, right? I'm like, oh, I like the unrealistic expectations thing that you suggested. You know, and then it keeps asking me more and more and more questions as we keep going. So the cool thing about this, and I think that this could be really helpful for your students if they can pick their own topic, right? And sort of brainstorm about it, is that it's a chatbot, right? So it will engage with you. And the more you do so, the more it will kind of narrow down its suggestions and help you as you continue to brainstorm. So I really love this for like I said, I do a bunch of brainstorming activities in my class anyway, but they have a hard time with the literacy part of this. So I think that it could be a really nice way for them to, you know, work on that.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
So you were struggling to get to a certain website.
Yes, I was having a hard time opening it
It
up.
was only because it was an incognito
I was in the
browser.
incognito
So
mode.
what did you end up doing to get there?
Oh, I just typed ChatGPT into Google.
So
Yeah, it was only because
Website
I was
anyone can
already
access.
logged in. This was to allow Stephanie to log in on her own account
Mhm.
without going back and forth. with mine.
So this isn't like a,
This would not
app.
typically.
This would
be
not,
an
yeah,
issue.
it would not usually happen.
but from a university computer, we don't need a certain program or app. It's just all.
Nope, it's all
open
web-based.
website.
Yep.
Just check.
Yep. So this is like a, you know, I like it for this example. I will quickly kind of go back because we talked a little bit about the hallucinations thing, and this is another in-class activity that I'm thinking about doing, and I have the example right here. So I'm pretending that I'm a student again, right? And this is my assignment. I've tried to make it like relatively generic, right? Like something that you would see. Write an analysis of the character Sansa Stark from Game of Thrones for my college level English composition class. And I told the AI what the analysis should do. But I was curious, I liked this, right? Because this is something very, very common, right? That we ask of our students, right? Like identify 4 academic articles that connect to this topic. So then it generates this beautiful essay for me. And here are my 4 sources. So it gives me all 4 of these sources. What's really interesting about this is that, and I think this is it's going to be a really fun exercise for them, right? The names of the people are largely real. I Googled most of them, but what's interesting is that they're not really connected to Game of Thrones scholarship like in any way. I think one of them was loosely connected. So this is what I told the AI afterwards. Can you include the URLs to the articles that you cited here, please? Because I did some basic Googling, right? And I'm like coming up with nothing. So this is what it says. Sorry for any confusion, but I don't have direct access to external sources like URLs, so I can't provide real-time or updated information. The authors and titles I mentioned are hypothetical.
Hypothetical. They don't exist.
Most of the
Makes them up.
many of the citations it will make up. If it's something that is really commonly cited, it may get it right. I found like maybe 20% of the time the articles are correct.
So literally those sources right there.
Don't exist.
They're all made up.
And it did that
Mhm.
based on what it, you said you
Probability
wanted.
modeling.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yep, exactly. And so, what would be interesting and what I'm planning to do for my students, right, is I'm gonna have them do something like this with ChatGPT, but there are other AIs that will generate real sources. So another interesting activity is, if you go to, for example, oops. So this is Bing AI. And
Because that does have web access.
yep, so this one is different from ChatGPT because it can search things that are online, right? So I'm gonna tell it find 4 sources about Sansa Star. That's not how you spell Sansa, sorry. And have it go. Oh, why did you do that?
Video find for source.
The word
Yeah.
season was in there.
But where was the, that was weird, that was different, okay. I'm not sure why I did that.
Yeah. Bing is still based on the
Yeah.
ChatGPT database. So
It didn't, yeah, but it didn't do, I don't know, there was a,
Do you have to specify academic sources or?
no, last time I did this, it was, yeah, and it, cause it even looked a little bit different, it had like you could choose which, like if you
Oh,
wanted
interesting.
creative mode, or if you wanted regular mode or something else, and that's not here anymore.
well, you're logged into the Bing account.
And
But
that's,
if
that's you
you're doing a
too, yeah,
search-
yeah, so that
A
could be
search
it,
for sources, that's just like a web search, really.
yeah,
That's not a, you're not asking it to write a paper using those sources.
exactly,
So
yep.
that I don't see as a problem necessarily.
But there is an open AI structure, well, not open API structure. So more and more search tools will connect with it and vice versa. So I think a lot of those things are growing pains.
So in that scenario of, say that student who submitted the paper to you, John, who clearly,
Didn't even bother to read the
Mm.
response.
so then you knew that was written by, say, by AI. If they included hypothetical sources, right, which you're suggesting happens a lot. If they submitted it through Brightspace and you ran the turn it in function,
I would never, ever use it. What most respectable colleges have done is turned off that capability. Because some studies have found up to a 50% error rate in both directions. It will detect a lot of things as being generated by AI that were not, and it will not catch much of the stuff that was generated by AI.
I've heard that, but in the case of hypothetical sources, that's something that's pretty easy to catch. Would it catch that? You know? No?
Probably not.
Huh.
Because it doesn't do a search for that.
Right.
It's basically looking for patterns of
Okay.
structure in
Right.
the data, you know. It's not really checking the content either. It's using an AI interface to look at whether it has the types of characteristics of sentence structure, paragraph length, word counts, and so forth that match those generated by AI tools.
So it's not like an editor that would go through and say, the
No.
source is not.
Right.
properly-" Okay,
No.
interesting.
Yeah, so
But-
we would
but-
have to,
But that at least is something we're used to doing.
right, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. But I mean, I think doing something like this with our students is helpful because I'm not sure that they know that not everything that's being generated here is correct, right,
No,
or
they
or
don't.
true, yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, so let me go back to which tab was I in? I don't even know. This one maybe?
It'd be an incognito browser, which,
This one,
yes.
right? Okay, yep. All right, so let's go back here. Okay, so that's an example of that. I also have, so there's a couple other examples that I'm gonna be doing with my students in class. I thought that this one was kind of fun if you're thinking about, you know, like audience and tone and purpose and whatever. You know, to maybe choose like a character that most people in class might be familiar with, you know, like I'm thinking, you know, like Ariel from The Little Mermaid or whatever, you know. And then have students brainstorm a list of possible subjects and then have the students use AI to write on one of those subjects from like a few perspectives and have them consider things like purpose, tone, and audience for each one of those, right? So maybe Ariel, you know, they ask the AI to write from the perspective of Ariel, and it's, you know, it's how she feels about pollution, right? Like, and kind of see what she says, right? And see how accurate or not it is. And then I was going to kind of do it like a little contest in class and give them, you know, like bonus points or something for the most unique perspective, just to see how it does, right? Like how it does writing from these different points of view. And then this one connects to what we were just doing, right? Like ask ChatGPT to generate sources for the writing assignment you're working on, and then ask another, you know, internet-based AI, whether it be Bing or Bard or whatever, right, to do the same, and then find out what was generated. Are the suggestions any good or not, you know, etc. Okay. So I'm going to talk just a little bit about some out of class assignments. One of the things that I'm going to try to stress this semester is that while you can use AI for just about everything, that doesn't always mean you should. And sometimes using AI, I mean, if we even like, if we throw all the ethical considerations like out the window, right? Just thinking about how sometimes using these tools might actually be more work for you than if you were to just do the thing yourself, right? So one of the things that I'm going to have my students do in English composition this semester is do something called a reflective process book, which is going to be a series of 4 assignments that they do alongside their scaffolded research paper assignment. So they've got a research paper assignment that they do in 4 pieces over the course of the semester. So their process book is going alongside of that. So it's basically thinking about, okay, I understand that you're probably going to be using AI to help you with the research paper, which is fine, right? Because we're going to talk about why that's okay and whatever. But I want this assignment to be their own sort of like critical thinking, right? So thinking about like, okay, I know you're going to use AI a little bit, but then you should also have some of your own stuff, right? So I've got a different one for each piece of the assignment. So for their first one, they have to write me like a very short essay about their topic, right? And what their community is and how they think their community uses literacy. Very, very short. So this one is due after, this process book is due after the first piece of the scaffolded research assignment. And they're basically describing their process to me, how they did it, right? So tell me about what brainstorming you did in and out of class. Tell me if you engaged with AI and how you engaged with AI. You know, what are some questions you wanted answers to? What's the purpose of the project? What are 3 goals you'd like to achieve by the end? You know, you can copy and paste the exchanges that you have with AI right in here, right? And then, you know, submit 1 double space page worth of reflection. So like they absolutely could use AI to do this if they wanted to. But the harder I think it's almost going to be like more work than anything else, right? Because they're going to have to change all of the details so that they're applicable to our class, right? And the AI will make stuff up and fill in the gaps that it doesn't know from however they prompt engineer, right? What they want to see. So I've got 4 of these. They're all here. Just 1 page for each one. Each one is doing something a little different. So this one is focusing on research. So what challenges did you face? What sources did you explore? What strategies did you use to collect information for this annotated bibliography assignment? Could you find a lot of information or not much? What are your next steps? Did you find unexpected information? Whatever. So these are questions that I just want them to answer. And the other thing about this process book is that the whole thing is graded based on completion. So write me a 1-page double-spaced reflective something about your process. Do that and you get an A. So I'm making it much more kind of like approachable.
This
for
course
them.
is not about AI.
It's not.
So, but it's amazing how explicit you're being about this.
Mhm.
And that seems to be what you're suggesting, is like, be open and explicit. Don't be coy about it. Tell me how you're using AI.
Yeah.
And the answer could be, I'm not.
Right.
But the tone you're suggesting is it's okay that you do.
And that's like for me, and I mean, I don't know if, John and Maggie, I'd be curious to hear from you guys about
One thing that
approach.
a lot of people have been suggesting is to have a discussion with their students about what ethical uses of AI are and set some class guidelines. And then if students buy into that, it may be more likely that they'll follow the guidelines. But a really common type of assignment is to have students do something with AI, do something on their own, sometimes before or after that, and then have it compare the results of the two and critically analyze their own and the AI to evaluate the relative strengths and benefits of it,
Absolutely.
I think that,
Yeah, and turning in the dialogue is a good part of it. Sorry.
yeah, no, I was just going to say that I think students are going to use AI regardless, of how much we as instructors incorporate it into our class. And so I do, I think I follow a lot of, Stephanie's approach and perspective on it, that if we can, help them understand AI as a tool for their learning and the ways that, most, that are appropriate for it, I think it's going to serve them better in the long run, because, there's certainly opportunities throughout their life and career that they may lean on AI for, and, to be able to navigate this tool, I think is I think it's going to be important, in the long run.
One approach that a number of people have suggested is to think about how AI tools might be used in various disciplines and the types of careers that our students get, and help them prepare to do that efficiently and productively. That's, again, it's not going to go away, and they're going to be using these tools, but it would be nice if they learned how to use it in ways that increase their productivity instead of replaces learning.
Yeah, definitely. And that's why I kind of went back and forth about sharing this example, because this is not an AI based assignment, right? But I think having that contrast and saying like, listen, you need to decide like when it's most appropriate to use this tool, right? Like, is it, it's not always more efficient to do it this way.
That comes through loud and clear with the way we structure that assignment.
Right.
That's helpful. Really, that's helpful. Be explicit, assume they're going to use it, then discuss it. In what ways is it useful? In what ways isn't it? Kind of,
and I think obviously the tools have, the capability of AI has increased, with the introduction of, ChatGPT. But, I know for me, I've been begging my students to use spell check for years. I've been begging them, just run it. And that is AI, right? That is a way of, for them to use technology to check their grammar and spelling. And so, if we, sort of think about the ways that students are already using AI, I mean, I use it when I'm composing an email, Google will finish my sentence for me, often in a more concise way than I was planning on. And so it's, there are like ways that we've been using these tools, and I, at least in maybe smaller ways, I think we can definitely use it in bigger ways now with you know, ChatGPT and other tools like it. But you know, I think that in some ways we've already been engaged in some of this.
From a practical matter, if a student, like the example you cited before, proofread my paper,
Mhm.
practically, is the best way to do that just to go to this website and a student copy and paste their entire paper into it? Or are there other products that are better at this that they can buy and download? I mean, how does it really work?
I mean, there are so many generative AI options now. And that's one really interesting thing that I
The
think
big
is,
ones though are ChatGPT.
Yeah, yeah.
Now Claude has been coming up.
it's been
quickly.
getting big, yeah. But I think it is gonna pose potential accessibility stuff later, you know, like later on, or like inclusiveness, I suppose. You know, because if they don't remain free, then that's going to be really interesting, right? But I expect
I
that,
think there'll always be some for you.
you think so? Yeah. I expect that my students are largely going to use ChatGPT because
just
it's like the most
copy
popular
it,
one.
paste it into a website, no fee, no charge.
Yep.
And it produces information back from
The
there.
only restriction is sometimes during heavy usage periods, it may take a while to get in.
Mhm.
Usually mornings and evenings are the best time if you have a free account. The paid account gives you priority to get access and also allows you to have longer prompts.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, and it'll tell you, like, when you go to ChatGPT, there's like the 3.5, I think, which is the free
The free
version,
one.
and then is it
Free
4.0?
4.0
Is the paid
well,
one.
you have the choice of either one.
Right, yeah, you could pick which one you
In
choose to
this
use.
moment, yeah.
Yep. So just one more quick assignment since we're running toward the end here. I chose to share an annotated bibliography assignment because that's something that I feel like many people across the disciplines would give, right, in classes. So this is long, so I'm gonna kind of scroll down a little bit, but basically what they need to do is find 6 different credible sources, and you know, do the normal things, summarize the source, evaluate the source, whatever, right? So very typical annotated bibliography. So at the bottom, just like with the other assignments, so this is a practice that I've been doing, that I'm doing this semester, is I have a note on AI for every assignment that they do. So here's where I'm telling them what's acceptable and what's not. So you can use AI to generate your bibliographic citations. So I teach English, so we use MLA. And then I'm gonna do an in-class activity with them where they check to see how the citations are.
So
And
this is, because this is not something that it does very well.
and it's interesting because I've been experimenting with ChatGPT and like some of the ones that we have like linked with the library, like Noodle Tools and Night Sight and whatnot. And it's really fascinating to see what they do, what they all do well and what they don't do well. So it'll be an interesting kind of exercise. And part of this too is to say, like, you know, it's all kind of an experiment, right? Like, yeah, sure, like have it make a citation for you and then let's find out if it's right or not, right?
Yeah, I was gonna ask you, how do you think it does with those?
It does,
With
it
citations?
does okay.
Okay.
It does okay.
But there's better tools out there.
Yeah,
for that.
yeah. But it's mostly, right, I mean, if you don't have them experiment with all of these sorts of things, then they're just going to assume that ChatGPT can do everything perfectly, right? So,
And a new feature was added to ChatGPT recently where you can set up default, so you can specify the length of responses and so forth, and that will
oh,
be,
interesting,
as within the last week, it was a
Okay.
recent addition.
interesting.
And one instructor actually, who was on a podcast I just heard this week, had given a prompt to students that told ChatGPT to always take a contrarian position. So when a student loaded an argument, it would automatically provide counter arguments, which is a good way of helping develop critical thinking skills.
For sure, yeah. So then I told my students that you can use AI to help you find sources, but you know, remember that, like, for this assignment anyway, I'm asking my students to find sources through Penfield's website, which AI cannot access, right? So remember but if AI does suggest sources, because some of the sources it suggests are good, right? And are okay, you know, especially like very general stuff, like general information, common knowledge, you know, it's really good at. So, and then you can use AI to help you understand content in the sources that you are finding, and then you can then use what AI says to help you write your own summary of the source. So I really love this. I was talking to John about this before we began. A lot of academic articles are in this really complicated jargon, right? That can be really challenging for students to understand. So one thing they can do, right, is they can take the abstract of the article while they're doing research and load it into generative AI and have the AI explain the abstract to them in words that like a 15-year-old would
I was
understand.
just thinking that that could be a engineered prompt to say, could you explain this at a high school level?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep. And it's great, and most of the time I played around with it quite a bit. So far I've been very happy with the responses that the AI has given. They've been pretty correct so far. So it's a great way, I think, to sort of make doing research seem a little bit more friendly, right, to students, because then they can understand what they're reading.
It sort of reminds me of those side by side Shakespeare in plain English books,
Oh, yeah.
right? That's how I read all of my Shakespeare, because if you're not used to it, you can then start to get used to the language and what it means, and so
That's a great analogy. And I mean, I think, however we as teachers feel about AI, right, then that will impact what your notes look like, right? I mean, some people might be fine having students use AI to create summaries, right? I mean, maybe that's a low stakes thing that it doesn't,
could be a useful learning tool for students.
Right.
If they can't understand some of the readings you've assigned or that they found, it gives them a better understanding of it, and that can be useful.
Yep. So
I think it'll, I'm hopeful that it'll build their confidence in, their own writing, especially if, John, you mentioned doing kind of a comparing and contrasting to see where, they might find improvements on, and, might make them feel like when they do have to write something in class, like, oh, like I can do this, hopefully.
There have been at least a few cases where instructors have found that students preferred writing themselves to having this done when they were using ChatGPT. Well, actually, it was GPT-3 last fall, for example,
Right.
Because they found it a little too mechanical and so forth, and they lost it. It didn't give them the same sense of autonomy that their own writing would.
Right.
Now, I'm not sure that will show up when students are taking the gen ed courses that they have to take, and they may not have as intrinsic motivation, which is, I think, the issue I have with a few students this past summer.
Yeah, your point 3 there, you can then use the summary to help you write your own summary that suggests like editing and rewriting, which may take more effort time than just writing it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. And to kind of connect to that, like in creative writing courses, right? I have been highly unimpressed by what generative AI has been able to produce, right? It's nowhere near the level of, I think it still sounds a little bit too robotic for my ear, I think. So I think in some
Have you ever watched
contexts.
any of those Christmas movies?
That's a separate thing. Yeah, that's for me anyway, right? We'll say for me.
That's very formulaic.
Yeah, exactly.
I attended a wedding this summer, and when it was time to exchange their vows, they were joking, but one of them used ChatGPT to write the vows. And then it was so clear.
That's great.
The meaning was there,
Yeah.
but it was so, it was not affectionate, it was not loving, it was very mechanical sounding. And then she joked, it's like, now I'm going to tell you what I really want. the meaning was the same.
Yeah.
It just didn't sound loving or affectionate at all.
Yeah. The tone is like, it's fascinating to think about it that way.
I like that idea for a creative writing class, to write something like that. And yeah, that's cool.
Especially, I teach like poetry writing, right? So, you tell generative AI to write you a poem and you're going to get like a sonnet or, something else
well,
that,
but then you can tell it,
you can
to
tell it not
rewrite
to.
it as a
Yeah.
haiku or rewrite it in the style of a given poet. And
Yep.
that's a pretty decent job of that.
It does
It's not
okay.
great. It's not
Yeah.
gonna make it to the, any of
Yeah.
the top poetry publications. But
Right, yeah. But it is interesting to see its capabilities. So I
now,
think
this is a
we're-
little outside the range of today's topic, but in tomorrow's podcast, we have someone who uses to generate business simulations in his courses. Not only generate the simulation, but converting it into a Python program that could then be run as a simulation on a day-to-day class basis, for example,
Oh, interesting.
to have students, interact with that. And
That's cool.
ChatGPT essentially developed the software code for it, and you could then just directly run that. It's really good at programming tasks.
I was at a webinar earlier this summer that there was someone who was using it in the medical field, and they had ChatGPT like create patients, and they would give like very basic parameters, right? Like I want someone who's between the ages of 60 and 70, and like some other things, but it would create people, right? And there were other AI softwares that would then like generate like video of this person doing their thing and whatever. It was insane. Aside from the occasional glitch as they were speaking, it looked like a real human.
Wow.
It was crazy.
And this is the early days. I mean, we had AI was making such incredibly slow process for like 20 years or so, and then all of a sudden it's exploded in the last couple of years.
All right. Yeah, thank you for coming.
Yeah. I'll go there this afternoon.
Play with it.
You should. It's
Yeah.
fun. It's fun to play with.
I like the way it sounds like the way you interact with your students is sort of at a next level. So I assume you're going to use this. Let's talk about how to use this.
Yeah.
Even though the course is not about using it.
Yeah.
You're just assuming that. It's probably the way to be right now. I agree.
I'm worried that I'm maybe a little bit too like nervous. I don't know, whatever, right? Because I've been doing this all summer, but like yesterday when I was going through and they do like the syllabus recon thing. So where they go through the syllabus and they pulled out 5 things that are most important. And in every single class, they said AI in every class. And usually maybe one class will say like academic dishonesty, right? But it came up in every single class,
They're
which I
all
thought was so
thinking about it.
interesting.
And
Yeah.
there was a survey that was done last spring, I think it was in March or April, where 75% of the students who have used AI tools have said they will use them whether they're allowed or not in their classes. So we're all
It's
going
here.
to be seeing it.
Yeah.
The original AI, our academic integrity statement talks about plagiarism, but it doesn't specifically refer to this.
Not yet.
And it's almost impossible to
Yeah.
prove unless they admit to it or they turn in something ridiculously stupid like my student did.
Well, thank you so much,
you.
Stephanie.
All
I
right,
think
thank
this
you.
is such
Thank
an
you.
important conversation, and I'm glad that we got together to talk about it.